They made me scrub floors in front of the entire base, laughed as I saluted officers who spat orders at my face, called me worthless, disposable, a mistake in uniform. But when I finally entered my clearance code into that system, and every alarm in the facility started blaring, their smiles died instantly. If you've ever been underestimated, judged by your cover, or silenced when you had power all along, hit that like button right now. This story will shake you to your core. Subscribe because you'll want to see how karma serves justice on a silver platter, and trust me, what's coming will leave you speechless. My name is Bryn Castellanos. I'm 28 years old and I'm a Major General in the Strategic Intelligence Division, but for 6 weeks at Firebase Atlas, a remote military installation buried deep in the mountain range where winter comes early and mercy comes never, nobody knew that. Nobody had a clue. I arrived wearing plain fatigues with no insignia, no rank markers, nothing that would give me away. I looked like every other new recruit stumbling off the transport truck, dust on my boots and uncertainty in my eyes. That was exactly the point. I was there on a classified assessment operation, sent directly by Pentagon oversight to evaluate base security, leadership integrity, and troop morale. The command structure at Firebase Atlas was broken, fractured in ways that were causing good soldiers to request transfers or worse, and I was sent to find out why. The moment I stepped into that base, I felt it. The air was thick with something toxic, something that went beyond the usual military discipline. It was fear mixed with cruelty, and it started at the top. Lieutenant Thane Merrick was the acting base commander, mid-30s with a jaw that looked carved from granite and eyes that held nothing but contempt. He ran Firebase Atlas like his personal kingdom, and questioning him wasn't just discouraged, it was dangerous. Standing beside him was Sergeant Holt Riven, built like a concrete wall with fists that had clearly done more talking than his mouth ever did. Then there was Corporal Isla Vaughn, sharp-featured and sharper-tongued, the kind of woman who climbed ranks by stepping on backs and enjoyed every crunch beneath her boots. My first day, Thane looked me up and down like I was something stuck to his shoe. We were standing in the administrative building, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and he circled me slowly while other soldiers pretended not to watch. "You look soft," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Weak. I give you a week before you're crying for a transfer. Women like you don't last here. This isn't some comfortable desk job where you can smile your way through assignments." He assigned me to sanitation duty right there, didn't even wait for my processing to complete. I took the mop from the supply closet, felt the weight of it in my hands, smelled that sharp chemical cleaner that would become painfully familiar, and I started documenting every word, every expression, every soldier who looked away because they knew this was wrong but were too afraid to speak up. By week 2, the mockery had escalated into something darker. Morning formation in the mud, rain coming down in sheets that soaked through every layer of clothing, and Thane decided my posture wasn't proper enough. He made me drop and do push-ups right there in front of everyone, and Holt stood over me with his boot inches from my face. I could see the worn treads, smell the leather and dirt, and hear his voice cutting through the rain. "You're nothing here, Castellanos. Just another number we'll forget before the month is over. You think you matter? You don't." Behind him, Isla was laughing with a group of soldiers, loud enough to make sure I heard every word. Can't believe they let her kind in. Probably slept her way through basic training. It's embarrassing, really. My muscles burned. Mud filled my mouth when my arms finally gave out on Rep 47. The rain mixed with sweat and something else. Maybe tears. Maybe just more rain. But I kept going. I documented everything. Week 4 arrived like a storm I could feel building in my bones, and that's when Thane decided to make an example of me in the most public, most humiliating way possible. He called formation in the main hangar, that massive space where our voices echoed off metal walls and 200 soldiers stood in perfect rows. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw his smile. He'd accused me of failing an equipment inspection, held up a rifle that he'd personally sabotaged, made sure every scratch and speck of dirt was visible under those harsh overhead lights. "This is what happens when standards drop." His voice boomed across that hangar, bouncing back at us from every direction. "Look at her. This is pathetic. This is what failure looks like. I stood at attention, eyes forward, while 200 pairs of eyes burned into me. And then he did it. Thane stepped forward and backhanded me across the face, the crack of his palm against my cheek so sharp it silenced even the ambient hum of the ventilation system. I tasted copper immediately, felt my lips split open, heard ringing in my ears that had nothing to do with the acoustics. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 soldiers watched their commander assault someone they thought was a defenseless recruit, and not one of them moved. Not one spoke up. That told me everything I needed to know about what Thane had built here. As I was dismissed, Isla leaned in close enough that I could smell her mint gum, and she whispered with fake sweetness, "You should just leave, honestly. Save yourself the embarrassment of washing out officially." I touched my split lip, tasted blood and rage mixing on my tongue, and I smiled. Something in that smile made her step back. "I'll leave when my job is done, Corporal," I said quietly. She didn't understand. None of them did. That night, I sat alone in my assigned bunk in the separated quarters where they kept soldiers they were trying to break. I held ice wrapped in a towel against my face with one hand, felt the cold numbing the swelling, while my other hand typed encrypted reports to Pentagon oversight on my concealed tablet. The evidence had grown into something massive. 47 violations of military code, 12 documented assault cases, systematic abuse that went back years, patterns of behavior that destroyed careers and broke spirits. I carried the weight of all that truth while they thought I was carrying nothing but shame. Week 5 brought a routine base inspection announcement, the kind that happens quarterly and that most soldiers barely notice. Digital security audit, Thane called it during morning formation, his tone dismissive and bored. All personnel must verify clearance codes. Tech team handles officer codes. Enlisted personnel will use the public terminals. Then his eyes found mine across the formation ground, and that cruel smile returned. "That means you, Castellanos. Try not to break anything with those incompetent hands of yours." Laughter rippled through the ranks like they were required to find him funny. The days leading up to that audit felt different. I was calm in a way I hadn't been before, like a weapon that had finished being sharpened and was finally ready for its purpose. Soldiers continued their mockery, but I moved through it like water, untouchable, already seeing past this moment to what was coming. A young private named Una approached me one evening near the supply depot, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to cover for my mistake last week, ma'am. I mean..." She caught herself, eyes wide. "Sorry, I shouldn't call you that. I don't know why I said that." I smiled at her, really smiled, and something in her expression shifted like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. "It's okay, Una. You will soon." She looked confused, opened her mouth to ask what I meant, but I just walked away. Some revelations can't be explained. They have to be witnessed. The morning of the audit arrived with crisp air that tasted like change. Base lockdown protocol meant everyone had to verify through the central security system. No exceptions. Thane lounged in the command center with Holt and Isla, coffee steaming in his hands, completely relaxed. I was ordered to Terminal 7, the public access point in the main corridor where dozens of soldiers waited in line behind me, muttering about the inconvenience. I could feel their impatience pressing against my back like a physical force. None of them knew they were about to witness everything change. I stepped up to Terminal 7 with steady hands, and I could feel every eye in that corridor on me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that harsh white glow that makes military facilities feel cold and sterile. Behind me, soldiers shuffled impatiently, checking watches, sighing loud enough to make sure I heard their annoyance. Thane's voice crackled through the intercom system, dripping with that familiar contempt. "Hurry it up, recruit. We don't have all day for your incompetence. Some of us have actual work to do." Laughter echoed through the speakers from the command center, and I could picture him up there with his coffee, with Holt smirking beside him, with Isla probably recording this on her phone to mock me with later. I placed my palm on the biometric scanner. The screen glowed blue under my hand, warming slightly as it read the unique patterns of my fingerprint and palm print. Then I entered my code, each keystroke deliberate and clear. MG1247, Castellanos, Sierra. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. 3 seconds of absolute silence where the world seemed to hold its breath. I counted them, 1, 2, 3. Then every red emergency light in the entire facility exploded to life. The alarms that followed weren't the normal ones, not the fire drill bells or the security breach warnings. These were deep, resonating tones that vibrated through the floor and into your chest, the kind of alarms reserved for base commander arrivals or national security emergencies. The automated system voice cut through everything, cold and mechanical and absolutely authoritative. Major General Clearance verified, authority level Omega, all personnel stand by for command transition. Every single screen in Firebase Atlas, from the smallest tablet to the massive displays in the command center, simultaneously switched to show my service record. My official photograph in full dress uniform, chest covered in commendations and medals. My rank: Major General Bryn Castellanos, Strategic Intelligence Division. 47 commendations for exceptional service. Pentagon-level security clearance. Authorized for classified operations and command assessment protocols. It was all there, undeniable and official, broadcasting to every corner of the base. The chaos that erupted was beautiful. Soldiers snapped to attention so fast I heard boots clicking against concrete like gunfire. The mumbling behind me cut off as if someone had hit a mute button. I turned slowly, took in their faces. Shock, horror, disbelief. A young corporal who'd laughed at me yesterday during mess duty looked like he might actually faint. Una stood near the back, and when our eyes met, her jaw had dropped so far I thought it might actually unhinge. But her eyes were shining, and I saw the beginning of a smile trying to break through her shock. From the command center I heard something crash, glass shattering, Holt's coffee cup hitting the floor probably, then footsteps, running, stumbling footsteps. I started walking toward the command center with measured steps, my boots echoing in the now silent corridor. Every single soldier I passed saluted crisply, their hands trembling, voices stammering apologies that ran together into a stream of "ma'am" and "general" and "didn't know" and "so sorry." I returned each salute with perfect military precision, my face neutral, my eyes forward. Thane stumbled out of the command center like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse. His face had gone pale, that confident smirk completely erased. Behind him, Holt stood frozen in the doorway, his massive frame suddenly looking small. Isla had pressed herself against the wall, her phone clutched in shaking hands, all that sharp cruelty drained away, leaving only terror. Thane tried to speak, his voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "Ma'am, there must be some kind of mistake, I held up one hand. He stopped mid-sentence like I'd physically struck him. The corridor was so quiet I could hear his rapid breathing, could practically hear his heart hammering against his ribs. 6 weeks of mockery, 6 weeks of abuse, 6 weeks of him thinking he was untouchable. All of it came down to this single moment, and I let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of his situation to fully sink in. His legs were literally shaking. I could see his knees trembling beneath his uniform. "Lieutenant Merrick," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You slapped a superior officer, in front of 200 witnesses." I stepped closer to Thane, watched him try to hold my gaze and fail. "You called me weak, soft, questioned whether I belonged in this uniform." My voice stayed level, controlled, but every word carried the weight of 6 weeks behind it. "I've spent every single day watching you abuse your power. I've documented every assault, every illegal order, every act of cruelty you thought nobody would ever answer for." I pulled out my tablet, turned it so he could see the files. Pages and pages of evidence. Timestamps, witness statements from soldiers too afraid to speak up before, video footage from security cameras he didn't know I'd accessed. You broke 47 articles of military law. You created a culture of fear so toxic that good soldiers were requesting transfers or breaking down completely. You're a disgrace to this uniform, Lieutenant, and your command ends right now. The military police arrived exactly on schedule because I'd called them an hour before the audit even began. They came through the main entrance with that unmistakable authority, and I watched Thane's face as he realized this wasn't spontaneous, that I'd planned every second of this. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists echoed through the corridor, and something about that sound felt like justice finally having a voice. Holt and Isla were restrained next, pulled forward by MPs who weren't interested in excuses or explanations. Isla was crying, mascara running down her cheeks, all that cruelty dissolving into desperate sobs. Holt stayed silent, his jaw clenched. But his eyes held something I'd never seen there before, actual fear. Thane found his voice one last time as they led him away. "You set us up," he said, and it sounded like an accusation, like I was the villain in his story. I met his eyes one final time. "No, Lieutenant, I gave you every opportunity to be decent. Every single day you could have chosen kindness over cruelty. You could have led with integrity. You chose this. You chose every moment that brought you here." I watched them escort him away, watched him stumble slightly on the steps, watched until he disappeared into the transport vehicle. It was over. I assumed official command of Firebase Atlas that same afternoon. My first order was immediate culture reform, starting with individual meetings with every soldier who'd suffered under Thane's command. It took 3 days of sitting across tables in the conference room, listening to stories that broke my heart, hearing about abuse that went back years, watching soldiers cry with relief that someone finally believed them. Una came in on the second day, and this time when she saluted, her hand was steady. "Thank you, General," she said, and tears streamed down her face, but she smiled through them. "Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for seeing us." 3 months later, I stood on the base overlook at sunset, watching how the light hit the valley below and turned the mountains gold. Firebase Atlas had become something different, something whole. Base morale reports showed the highest ratings in 5 years. Soldiers smiled during formations. The fear that had poisoned this place was gone, replaced by something that felt like actual pride. Thane had been court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. His military career ended in disgrace. Holt and Isla were demoted and reassigned to different bases where they'd be watched closely. And Una had just been promoted to corporal, her ceremony scheduled for next week. I'd received new orders that morning, another assignment, another base that needed assessment. But Firebase Atlas would be okay now. They didn't need me anymore, and that was exactly how it should be. To everyone watching this who's ever been underestimated, your moment is coming. To everyone who's been mocked for being too soft, remember that softness isn't weakness, it's strategy. And to the bullies out there, listen carefully. You never know who you're really dealing with. That quiet person you're tearing down might be documenting every word. If this story reminded you that justice might be delayed but it's never denied, smash that like button. Comment below if you've ever had to hide your power to reveal someone's true character. And subscribe because the world is full of people who underestimate the quiet ones. And I've got more stories about the moment they realize their mistake. This is Major General Bryn Castellanos. Stay strong, stay patient, and never ever reveal your hand too early.